Hello and welcome back. It's time for us to talk about the four empires of Mesopotamia. As we go through this information, we're going to think about these questions. What were the most important achievements of the Mesopotamian empires? Why did they rise and fall so easily? I also want us to think about which empire was the most successful and why. So let's just take a quick preview of the four empires we're going to discuss. As you can see here, we're looking at timeline in BCE. So the larger the BCE number, the earlier in time you were. Closer you get to 0, later in time you were. So our first empire, the Assyrian Empire, it's right here around 2300. Then the Babylonians took over. Then the Assyrians came along and took over the Babylonian land and kept conquering and conquering until they grew massive. Then they fell to the Neo-Babylonians. Let's back up before we talk about those four empires. The city-states of Sumer existed for about 1500 years. Sumer was a land of independent city-states, as you can see here. There are many independent city-states. They all operated on their own. Despite sharing many of the same needs in a close area, they never got together and united. Instead, they frequently fought for land and water and all other resources. They battled each other and could not get along, so they remained small. The smaller they were, the weaker they were, which left them open to being attacked by others. So we're going to stop here for a quick question. Thinking back to what we've learned about city-states, what is one problem the city-states of Sumer faced by remaining independent? Was it A, they were unable to trade their crops with smaller groups? B, they were unable to defend themselves against stronger groups? C, they had to spend a lot of time conquering other groups? Or D, they had to get most of what they needed from larger groups that were far away? Take a minute to answer that question. If you need to back up in the video, you can do so now. Alright, so let's move on to the Akkadian Empire. At about 2300 BCE, the Sumerians were conquered by a new group called the Akkadians. The Akkadians came from the north. Great King Sargon. He was a very strong military and political leader. He was a skilled general and the first emperor of the Akkadian Empire. He used his military skills to create a large army and to help conquer all the territories of Mesopotamia. Besides his military strategies, King Sargon was very strategic politically. He strengthened his power by doing various things, which included appointing his own men as governors of the city-states that he conquered, and declaring his sons rulers after his death. The Akkadian Empire developed rich, powerful cities. First, King Sargon copied many of the Sumerian ways. They were very smart, those Sumerians, and he thought, well, why not take what they did and make it our own? So he used their irrigation techniques, their cuneiform writing, and even their beliefs in their gods and goddesses. He appointed tributes that would collect money from the cities they conquered. And he basically told people, give them money and we will protect you. He used the money to build up his own cities. In the meantime, he also took down the walls of the cities. He did not want people that he conquered to have their own defense mechanism. So he broke down the walls but demanded loyalty from them. And like we said already, he assigned his friends to do the dirty work and be the governors of the city that he conquered. Under Sargon's rule, there were some artistic developments. The Akkadians developed three-dimensional sculpture called steles. You can see in this picture here, kind of sticking out, that they were able to do in the sculptures. Most of the steles that they crafted involved showing the Akkadian victories in various battles. Again, they were strong military empires, so they were really focused on that. They used this as a sign of intimidation too. Basically, they carved out all these steles and put them in the towns that they conquered, and people they conquered were constantly reminded of how strong the army was under King Sargon. These steles is basically how we know most of Akkadian history. Sargon's army was very successful. He actually developed a unique strategy in which he had a formation for his soldiers. His soldiers stood very close together, and then the men in the front would hold the shields while the men behind them would carry the weapons. So this was very strategic and not something that they had been doing at that point in time. It made them very strong as they went in to conquer other cities. King Sargon ruled for about 56 years. He did not die in battle despite all the fighting he did and his military skills. He died just of old age. After his death, other kings had difficulty ruling all the territory he had conquered. Basically, the empire had grown too big, too fast, and it was just hard to manage. So because the empire was so spread out, the kings had difficulty communicating their rules and then enforcing their rules in all of the conquered lands. Remember, this was the day before emails and cell phones, so reaching people very far away was not easy. So, despite all the war victories, the empire eventually fell and weakened. King Sargon and the Akkadians had created the world's first empire. This is their greatest achievement, and they are very well known for this. But despite all their victories, in the end, they did eventually fall. But before we talk about who they fell to, question break. What is the Akkadian Empire's greatest achievement? Is it A, world's first irrigation system, B, world's first written language, C, world's first empire, D, world's first organized religion? Take a minute, put in your answer. Alright, so I mentioned that the Akkadians fell to another empire. This was the Babylonian Empire. In about 1792 BCE, King Hammurabi, who was the current king of Babylon at that time, conquered the rest of Mesopotamia. And, fitting the name, he decided to have Babylon become the capital city. Okay. King Hammurabi was best known for his code of laws. He began writing the laws in about 1792 and continued drafting and revising them for another 40 years. We're talking a long time he was working on these laws. Hammurabi claimed that the gods told him to create the laws, and that the laws applied to everyone in his empire. So remember what people back then thought of religion and the gods. Made these laws pretty powerful. This was very strategic because once a rule was made by a god, it shouldn't be changed. Code was very detailed and had lots of different situations that it covered. It was written on a stele, like we just talked about that the Akkadians did, and placed in a temple so that everybody can see them. This, for sure, is the greatest achievement of the Babylonian Empire. So again, they had this first code of laws that applied to everyone. It was actually a way of unifying people because everybody was doing their own thing at the time, and it made things easier to control. So that was Hammurabi's main goal: unify and order. But despite the fact that it applied to everyone, it did not mean that the laws were really equal in reality. We're going to talk about that a little bit in class. But people now had a way of seeing and knowing what their rights and responsibilities were, which was huge at that time. But even though the laws were not equal, they were unusually fair. Even though some people had different standards, it was unusual for many of those people to have rights at all. So it was definitely a fairer way of life in comparison to some of the other city-states. Slaves were able to keep what they earned, and they could even buy their freedom. Women were allowed to earn property and even have money. This was definitely not happening in any other city-states at that time. So King Hammurabi named Babylon the capital city, as you can see here. Babylon is kind of geographically located centrally to the rest of the Babylonian Empire. This was very helpful. He decided to make this the center of trade by building roads around it, postal service, and maintaining a really good irrigation system. Because of its location and all of this that was built around it, Babylon became the center of trade, which helped the empire's economy become very successful. The economy became stronger and richer and stronger and richer. So the Babylonians thought their empire would last forever.